Hi, welcome to the third episode on my series of interviews with personalities on the early dance field. On this occasion, I have Lieven Bart. Lieven Bart is a professional choreographer, dance teacher, performer, and theater director. He is trained as a dancer and actor in Ghent and is an expert on 15th, 16th, and 17th century Italian and French court dance. Starting his career in 1987 at the Royal Ballet School as dancer and choreographer for early dance. 3 years later, he is awarded the prize for the best young talent in Belgium for his work on early dance. He studied with Barbara Sparty, Angine Febvre, Francine Lancelot, Béatrice Mazin, Anne-Marie Gardet, Elisabeth Aldrich, and Sandra Hammond. Since 1987, he assisted Barbara Sparty in Italy as dancer and co-teacher, and he continues this work at the FAMA Summer School and Festival in Urbino since 2002. Over his 35-year-long career, he has been dancing, teaching, choreographing, and directing productions in Germany, Austria, Spain, Italy, Sweden, United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Japan, Mexico, Russia, and the USA. As director of the Historical Dance Institute in Ghent, Belgium, he organized two important symposia on early dance in 1985 and 2000, together with the University of Cambridge, Stockholm, and Ghent. As a producer in historical festivals, he specializes in reconstruction on repertoire from the Middle Ages to the early modern periods. In Belgium, he is the director of the Institute for Historical Dance. As maître de danse, he conducts the balls of the Flemish Royal Opera and for the Festival of Flanders since 2005. Since 1997, he is appointed choreographer for the Landshuter Hochzeit, a worldwide acclaimed reconstruction of a medieval royal wedding in 1475 with 75 dancers. He has been invited as a choreographer for several international events and projects in Spain and United Kingdom. He is a stage director and choreographer since 2000 for the Brussels Operetta Theatre and has been invited for several productions at the Classical Theatre Company in Madrid. He is choreographer in residence for the Baroque orchestra La Cetra d'Orfeo in Belgium. In 2002, he starts teaching early dance at the Alicia Alonso Institute, a dance faculty at the Rey Juan Carlos III University of Madrid. Besides his wide curriculum, he has a wonderful good sense of humor, and the proof is this drawing he sent to me for this introduction. It is a pleasure, Lieven, to have you. How are you?
I'm fine. I mean, lockdown, although I have some projects going in live stream, so I cannot be complaining. I have a lot of work and yeah, I'm one of the artists who can still keep on working.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that in these very, very particular and sad times.
It is.
Let's go with the first question.
Yeah.
When did you get interested in early dance and why?
Yeah, I was like 12 or 13. And I was interested in everything what was theater. So I started doing the Academy of Acting. So we here in Belgium, we're so lucky that we get free classes of theater and pantomime and whatever. So I was 12, 13, and I continued doing this. I started at 16. I have been writing down some things because otherwise I would forget things. So then I went to the music school. I went to the music academy. We did opera classes. So you're getting involved with all of kinds of characters. I mean, you have to play Romeo and Juliet. You have to play Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet. You have to play Othello. You have to play whatever 19th century stuff. You know, you have to play characters. And when you're so young, it's not very obvious, but that's okay. So in the middle of my, let's say, my education in theater, one of the directors, because we have always to do these exams, and then you have to do, you have to do an exam, you have to play a character. He was using music of Ottorino Respighi, you know, which was Ottorino Respighi, and it's this piece which is called Arie Antiche or Danze Antiche. And Ottorino Respighi is, of course, like, say, a 20th century composer who used the 16th century lute music, yeah, for his modern, entre parenthèses, for his modern compositions. And I was so flabbergasted by this music, you know. And I discovered a little bit later, I mean, in my career, that he was using music of Caroso, you know, Fabrizio Caroso. He was using music of Spanish composers of the 16th and 17th century. He was using music mostly of, let's say, Italian composers. But I mean, okay. And I was, you know, I was taken by this. And I'm born, Carlos, I'm born in a village, I mean, really where there was no culture. I mean, there were lovely people and we had a nice time there, but I mean, we didn't have a record store, or we didn't have any, it was the 60s, you know, I'm born in 62, and there's nothing, I mean, nobody, you couldn't buy a record. I mean, there were no restaurants there except for if you died or you had your first communion, you could go and eat. But I mean, it was really primitive and also very nice. You know, it's what it is. But so I was so mesmerized by this music. So I was then, like, by 13, 14 years old, and then my voice, because I was a soprano, and then of course you get, yeah, your voice breaks, and then you get another part to sing. And so I took opera classes and blah, 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 blah. And so at a certain point, for my final exam to get a whatever diploma and medal, I had to play Mercutio from the Romeo and Juliet from Shakespeare. And then by accident, because we still had a black and white television, I saw the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet. And of course, there is this really incredible ball scene, you know, of Romeo and Juliet, which, I mean, today, okay, there's no early music in it because it's romantic music. You have these fabulous actors and actresses doing this kind of, yeah, I mean, Alberto Testo made this choreography, and I mean, he was still alive, I think. I don't know if, I mean, I think maybe, I don't know, but he made a kind of very beautiful choreography, although he didn't use any reconstruction of the 15th century. I mean, you know, I discussed this a lot with Barbara Sparty, and she said, well, I mean, it's not a reconstruction, but in spirit is the most perfect scene I have ever seen of Quattrocento dancing. You know, let's say the expression of Romeo when or Juliet when they see each other for the first time when she comes on the dance floor. You know, it's this moment that she comes out of the dark and she's doing this kind of choreography, which is not really a reconstruction, but works wonderfully. So I must say, I had seen that in the middle of the 70s, at the end of a Christmas day on BBC television, and I really was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Okay, so then, because I'm somebody, as a person, I'm trained as an actor, but acting means, for today, acting is a kind of separate profession. I mean, you act or you dance or you sing, but let's say back in the centuries, acting, dancing, and singing was not really separated. So at a certain point, I thought, well, as an actor, I maybe need some more movement training. And I was very interested in history. I mean, history has been my second passion. And a third passion is cooking. So I want to bring that up, but I mean, I'm going to tell you later about cooking. I mean, because maybe I would have been a cook, because at 12-year-old, I was on the edge of getting to a cooking school, but I didn't do it. So I went to acting school and whatever. Okay, so to make a long story short, I have to see what I wanted really to say. No, I went to the university for history. And in front of the building of the university building, there was a dance school. It was an old chapel. It was an old church changed into a dance school. And I went in front of that door, and I still remember it was one of my first days of being in another city, because like I told you, I was in an old village, and suddenly I come in Ghent, which is a kind of wonderful medieval city. And I see there's a little picture of this little design of Capriole from Marbeau. Yeah, Mr. Capriole doing his caprioles. Well, he wasn't doing it, but it's a print, of course. And I really like, you know, it's like lightning getting on your head, and you think, it's not possible. It's not possible that you can really reconstruct these kind of things. I mean, I'm talking about 1979. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that day I phoned my mother and my father, because it was my first week at the university, and my mother and father are very pragmatic and very realistic, or were very realistic people. And I had to learn an honest profession instead of dancing. So I said, well, I'm not coming home tonight because I have to take that class. I have to take that class. So my mother and my father yelled at me and said, if you're not at home at 8 o'clock, we will kill you, which, as you see, they did not do that. I had to take that. I knew from that point that would be my future. Although, I mean, this is a kind of, a point you have. And I took the classes, and it was a ballet teacher from the Royal Ballet of Flanders. And from that point, I continued. And I gradually learned, you're starting with branles from Marbeau, and you're starting with the basic stuff, but that's the grammar. You have to learn a new language, So at that time, it was Renaissance. It was 16th century, late 16th century, as at the end. I mean, we did Arbaud dances, we did some Caroso dances, but the directress of this dance center was very, 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 I mean, she really had a very big mind. So she started inviting, because we were a lot of people. I wasn't not the only one, but it was the beginning of a kind of movement here in Ghent. And she invited Andrea Francolanci, who was then really working in Paris, at the Sorbonne. So he was the kind of main person there. But she also invited Angie Fives from San Francisco. She invited, we went to go together to the early dance circle things. So we met Diana Cruikshank, we met Peggy Dixon, we met Jane Gingell, we met Barbara Siegel, we met, maybe I'm forgetting names. I'm sorry about that. But so 1983, 1984. And the good thing is that in Belgium, we got a lot of kind of funding and of traveling, because it's, it's also, it needs money to travel and to meet people. And, if you are a poor dancer, I've never been a poor dancer but it's nice to get money for your research. And in 1985, I mean, you have to learn your grammar, you have to learn your language, you have to learn what's the sources, and you have to learn what's right and wrong, or what you think it's right and wrong, because nothing is right and wrong. So in 1985, the directress said, well, we're going to make a colloquium, a symposium, and we're going to invite everybody we know at that time. Yeah, and people who can come, people who can afford to come, because there was no money. I mean, people who couldn't afford to come to Ghent, they didn't came. But I mean, I don't know how she did it, but I was a part of this organization. And so Ingrid Brainard, Barbara Spardy, Angie Fives, Madeleine Engelhorn, Andrea Francolanci, Francine Salzlo, Andrew Lawrence King, Dorothee Waterboer, Jane Gingell, Steve Player, Passo e Mezzo at that time. I mean, I cannot even remember all the names because we had so much work to invite these people, and they came for a whole week to Ghent. And for me, this was a kind of turning point, Carlos, because, I have been very lucky that at that point you see all these people in front of you performing, giving a lecture. I had to make the breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning for them. You had this kind of, there were lots of Americans also. I mean, I can't remember the names, but I mean, so, and then I really had this turning point that I could, you know, I still remember that Barbara Spardi came with, I mean, the Italian embassy was giving us grants to invite her whole company to perform. So I saw her performance in 1985 in our little dance studio, which is, you know, it was ridiculously small. I mean, don't think it's the Royal Ballet, you know. But I mean, she performed like 4 or 5 dancers, and I had to do the music for her. And there were only cassettes, you know, in these days. There was no CDs, there was nothing. So she said, "Oh, this is cassette 1, and you have to turn it to page B and roll it back for 30 seconds." You know, this kind of stupid things. Okay, but this wonderful Italian performance of Barbara Spardi's Gruppo di Danza Rinascimentale, I mean, I was really flabbergasted by this, and I decided to work with Barbara on Quattrocento. And then Angie Fives came, and she's a prima ballerina from San Francisco Ballet, and she was doing some workshops on 16th century technique, which is quite different from Quattrocento, from 15th century. But I mean, and so I think I'm the most lucky guy in the world that I could choose professors in 1 week and continue with them for an amount of time, you know, because otherwise you travel and you look and you go there and you go there and you think, okay, I like this or I don't like this. But I was very decisive about the 2 teachers for, let's say, my beginning career of 15th and 16th century dances. I started with this kind of style. And so I was very lucky to see them. And I traveled to San Francisco to Engine, and I went to Italy in Urbino, where Barbara was teaching. And yeah, I was, let's say, the most happy guy in the world. I mean, you know, because at a certain point you have to stick a little bit into a style, you know, because otherwise you get a little bit cut in 2 or in 3 or 4. And you have to think, okay, this is what I like, and this is what I continue. And it's the same thing. I mean, since I have been working in this dancing school for like 5, 6 years or 7 years, you have to have your basis. You have to have a kind of good technical basis, and don't change it too much. Although I can be critical, because I have been dancing in Barbara's company then in '87, and I thought, technically, we could change things, but yeah, you know, if you want to,
very lucky. You were very.
I was lucky to have.
They were great masters. Really.
Yes.
You have you have pointed out 2 very interesting things, which links with my next questions.
Okay.
One of them is about if you have any favorite period, or you have a favorite period, and the other one is about the reconstruction.
Yeah.
Which handicap do you face in reconstructing the dances, if you face any, and which is your method?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have been thinking a lot about this question. I mean, you know, there are much handicaps in you know, I mean, I can talk for all people I'm working with, and you, Carlos. I mean, writing down a dance is difficult. I mean, if you want to express something what you want, and you want to write down a choreography, it's horrifying difficult to write it down, you know? Okay, so I've written down, I mean, I made a kind of structure here. I mean, the people down there in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, wherever you want to do, I mean, they have never written down these things for us to reconstruct. They have never done it. You know, they did it, and they said, okay, most of the things people know, but we want to say the essential things about it. So, like for 15th century, the Italian dancing master didn't even bother to write the dancing steps. You know? I mean, everybody knows a doppio, sempio, everybody knows what a continenze and a ripresa is, and everybody knows what a contrapasse is. And until now, today, 2020, what date we are, 28th of November, nobody knows what a contrapasse is. although there's a lot of speculation, they haven't never written it down because everybody thinks, okay, contrapasso is a basic step. Why should we write it down? Okay, the same thing. I mean, the methodology I'm using is that I try to read everything in the original language. Okay. So I try not to use the traduction. I mean, I have been fortunate that Belgium, we speak Flemish, which is a kind of a language nobody understands. So we have 4 languages in the school, so we are have a little bit more advantage or a little bit more knowledge about languages. We learn French, we learn German, we learn English, we learn although not maybe perfect, but you have to learn it because otherwise you don't come around the world. I mean, in our profession. So, but I mean, the whole thing is that, I mean, dancing masters are writing treatises. I mean, in the 15th century, Abreu is writing his treatise as a present for the Sforzas, you know? It's a kind of present. It's a book, you know? And he's writing down his dances. I don't think even the Sforzas took it out of the library to learn the dances because they have been learning it by oral tradition, by Abreu, because he was there. So why should they look at a book? But a book was a present, you know? And since I'm called a specialist for Burgundian dance, it's not but that I'm Burgundian, I'm just Flemish. The black manuscript of Margaret of Austria, the black parchment manuscript, is actually a kind of jewel for the library. You know, it's black parchment, it's written in gold and silver. It's a kind of, you know, people write it down. And the only important thing I think about that, and I don't want to get further on this, but it's, I mean, there are pages left, so they could add some extra dances in the future, but accidentally maybe the scriber died or they didn't want to do another description of the dance. But it and very important is also that, like, the cover of the book is paid by one of the court ladies, which is Madame de Ravenstein. Yeah, and she was a very influential and a very, let's say, close friends to the Count and the Countess of Burgundy. So it's more like a gift, a present, and it's never meant to be for us to reconstruct these dances. And there's also a kind of, you see that with Domenico or Abreu or whoever have been written down these dances, it's a kind of, yeah, it's a kind of PR, you know, public relations towards each other. And I don't think that people really took these books and tried to reconstruct it because they were struggling. I mean, it's obvious they were struggling with how to describe the whole dances they were doing at that period. Carosa and Negri got a little bit further. Arbot was maybe more pedagogical. I mean, he had a little bit more insight and a little bit more knowledge of how communicating, how the basic whatever French repertoire could have been, because he puts already the steps on the music, and so the students can maybe read it or not. I mean, then you have Esquivel in Spain. I mean, he just gives you steps, and Jaque gives you ornaments, gives you choreographies, but I mean, nobody knows how it fits on the music. I mean, you have to make your decisions. And I think it's on the point of the academic dance that you have a little bit more how steps fit onto the bars in the music, and where's the plie, where's the releve in Baroque music. And then you go back to the 19th or late 18th and 19th century, where, yeah, it's not very obvious how the things fit. But from the 19th century on, we have some clues, because people are still dancing ballet. There is still all the old school of ballet. There's the old school of Bournonville. There is old school of let's say country dancing in England. Yeah, where we can have some clues, because it's a living tradition, which we cannot say about the early stuff. Yeah. Okay.
And which do you have any favorite period, or do you like everyone?
Well, I have to. I have been thinking about this, Carlos, because I mean, I'm an actor, so I play whatever. Yeah, no, I played Romeo and Juliet from Shakespeare until very modern stuff. So I think my favorite period is the period I'm working on at the present. So if I have to do something, I mean, for me, and I want to come to that point, music is very important in our history for early dance. I think in early dance, because I have doing a lot of modern dance and I've seen a lot of things going, people dancing in 20th century, even people, there's this kind of things that you don't need music to dance. But in early dance, I think the most important is the music. Yeah. In that concrete world, any music I like, and that's between 1415 until 1931, I mean, to say something silly, is if I like the music, I like to choreograph, and I do research on the background. I do research on what have you been dancing and what kind of dance was there, and how can you present this for a public of today, which was your next question, I guess. But it's the music. So, but to be very honest, I think my heart, or let's say my soft spot, is still 1450, Quattrocento, Cinquecento, and maybe a little bit, I think, the Spanish dancing of the mid 17th century, let's call it that. I mean, it's always a little bit limited to talk with words. Is this kind of music which is triggering me, and I think my soft spot is still early, late Renaissance. Barbara Spardit called it early Baroque. I think there is my core business. It's also maybe my core business, but it's not my core business because I've been doing a lot of 19th century and a lot of Baroque also. If I'm inspired by a music, and I'm inspired by any music, classical, which is a kind of general word for old music or early music, I'm inspired by that.
Okay, let's see if you can ask this very tricky question, which is, how can early dance be interesting for modern audiences?
Yeah, I mean, I prepared that question very carefully, Carlos. It's difficult. Of course, I have a lot of colleagues, and I have a lot of people who decide you can only do what is written. You follow the question. You follow the what's written, and I had this big discussion with Sparty. I talk about Sparty because he has been a really dear friend and a really dear professor for me, and we had fights and discussions about everything, but we remained friends. That's what are friends for. I think you have to dance it very well. So you have to be, I have been teaching all kinds of publics. I have been working with marvelous people, from amateurs who had knee problems and hip problems and memory problems, until role ballet first soloists, and then with Baroque specialists who knew everything and whatever. So you're working on a range of dancing. But I think everybody has to enjoy the part what he can enjoy. So if amateurs want to dance together and enjoy country dancing, or coming to a ball and enjoying the real thing about early dance, that's communicating with each other, and having fun in country dancing, which I think is wonderful, or waltzing together, or dancing a branle of Arbaud together in a big circle. I don't know how much time I have, Carlos.
Don't worry, we can just make another Zoom session.
No, but I had, like I said, I was working in this dance center, and because you're talking about modern public, I had been very fortunate that we got all these grants to go to America and to go all kinds of cities and whatever in all over Europe to research on dancing. Because we were an official institute, and we still are. But and I mean, talking about when I was young. And so at a certain point, we get a grant to fly to the Faroe Islands, which is above England, which is a little island or little islands above Scotland. Yeah, it's a part of Denmark. Yeah, where they have still the tradition of dancing together, branles. I mean, I call it branles. Maybe it's not the right thing, but the whole interesting thing is, since the islands were so cold and so far away from civilization, there was not even wood. There was not even wood to build instruments. You understand? And there were no trees, and so every single piece of wood had to be imported. Yeah. So until the 17th, 18th century, there was no wood on that island. So the whole tradition is that, yeah, if you don't have an instrument, if you cannot build a violin, if you cannot build whatever instrument in a wooden, yeah, they were singing together, and they were singing songs with like 50 strophes telling a story. And at the same time, all the people of the village were dancing together in a little room in a circle, dancing. And I'm going to say now a double to the left and the right. You know, you got my cartoon. Yeah. But okay, so we arrived there in the middle of the winter with our stipendium, and we got the money to, and then suddenly it seemed to be that the only hotel on the island was closed because it was burned down by fire, which we didn't know. Okay, so then we went to the tourist center where there was a very nice lady, and she said, "Okay, I will call up a family, and we will stay there." And in the middle of the winter, when they normally don't come together, the family called all the people of the island, and they said there are 2 researchers, and they want to see our dancing. So they organized an evening afterwards, because I mean the island was like, you know, they had to call 40 people together. And they came together, and they were singing these songs which we could not understand because it was not our language. But we were invited to join the circle, and we were taken into the circle to the left and the right. And even as a dancer, you know quite quickly what they were doing. And there was a lady in the middle, and they had a big bottle of alcohol, schnapps, whatever you call it, elixir, and they were doing this dancing and storytelling. So that's something, you know, you have to realize that as a researcher, you never can find in the treatises. You can never recall this spirit. I mean, if you're dancing a branle of Abo, it's a community dance. It's people dancing together in a village, and they have their own variations. They have everybody knows everybody, knows every story about everybody else. They have been married, they have been divorced, they have children, the children died. You know, it's a totally different thing. So what was the question again? I'm losing myself.
Yeah, it's how early dance can interest modern.
Yeah, okay. So that's something we cannot put on stage, you know? So it means that today we have to, I mean, we can never recreate the public of the last centuries. We can never recreate the fact that you're in a beautiful theater in 1715 and having a Baroque dance in the context of an opera. Maybe we can, but I mean, we think we can, but we cannot do that. We can never recreate the fact that Alberto from Austria, and then the daughter of Philip II, who was she was our regent in Flanders. She traveled from Spain through Italy, and then she came to Ghent, to Brussels, to be our regents, no? And she comes about, and the Negri is doing Austria Felice, which is dedicated to the Austrian Archduke. We can never recreate that atmosphere, because I mean, I still remember in 2000 I did a big symposium in Ghent again, and I wasn't prepared at all, because I was so much worked down, and I didn't have time to prepare my lecture. But I mean, I think I still remember that my first sentence on this colloquium, and there were all these people all over the world, which were the prima donnas of the historical dance. I said, I think Ostra Felice is a boring dance. You know, and when half of the public was doing, oh, no, you cannot say this, and half of the public was clapping their hands. And I said, well, listen, I mean, Ostra Felice is done by 6 women. I think they were done by nobility ladies. And there is Isabella, her name is Isabella, the daughter of Philip II, and then the Duke of Austria. They're sitting there. And I mean, the atmosphere of having the noble high society around you, and then opening a kind of festivity with big torches and beautiful costumes, we cannot reconstruct this. I mean, I've been performing for the Roll. We still have Roll. Yeah, you have still your Roll court in Spain. We have still our Roll court in Belgium, and I have been performing for the last king, and I have been performing for the king today. And it gives you a special, I mean, even if I don't believe anyway in this kind of the structure anymore, if the king and queen coming in the state room and they're sitting down and you have to perform on this, it's another energy. It's really strange. You know, I don't think you do it better than for a normal public, because I even if I have to dance for my kids or for my grandmother or for public, I don't know, I don't care. But if the king and queen are in the room, it makes it totally different. And I think, like you said, how can we make it interesting for the modern public is to use modern techniques in performing. Because most of the dances written down are not written down for, let's say, a theater where you have only one front. Yeah, because in Renaissance, people were sitting around. I mean, for the Baroque dance, it mostly you have the presence of the king. So these choreographies work a little bit more, although I'm not always convinced about the choreographies, but I mean, yeah, it's a personal taste. I think today, if you're doing early dance today, you have to be a modern performer. And so you have to convince the public by the fact that you can convince them by your technique. I mean, you have to be a good dancer, yeah, and not a lazy dancer or a dancer with limits. I mean, if you do 16th century, if you do 17th century, if you do 18th century, you have to be able to turn, you have to do double tour en l'air, you have to be able to entrechasse, you have to convince them, because the technique was there at that performance, at that level.
Lieven, in your opinion, my final question.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what is the educational dimension early dance knowledge can provide to the education programs at present? Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about dance students only. Any sort of students.
Yeah, no, I understand. No, I think, I mean, I can explain this by the fact that, I mean, I have been a lot in America, and for training, luckily, because I got all this kind of grants. But so I went to museums over there, and the difference between America and Europe is that what I experienced, and it is my impression, is that early dance can, or I mean, everything which can enliven history, yeah, can explain to the public, if they are in museums, if they are in the theater, if they are listening to music, or looking at a ballet. I mean, everything which can enlighten or can expand what you're looking at, you know. If I'm looking at a painting, I mean, that's why I'm telling, I was in Baltimore, and I went to this wonderful Baltimore museum, and there was a painting of a Renaissance lady, whatever, I forget the name of the painter. But next to the painting, they were putting a costume and some ornament, some jewelry of that time. So it means that you see the painting, and then you see the costume, and you see the jewelry. Of course, they cannot put dancers there. But I think, I mean, I have been doing a lot of, with Jane Gingell in the 80s and the 90s. I've been doing a lot of concerts in Hampton Court, in Kensington Palace in London. And I think that for a public of today, it's waking them up from one dimension. You know, they're looking at a painting, but then suddenly there are a couple of dancers in more or less the same costume, whatever it is, and they see moving these people, and they maybe understand a little bit more about the whole concept, about how the people had philosophy on how they express themselves in time and space. So I think that's very important, because today, I mean, because I have been in lockdown, I'm not somebody who's looking much to television. And I was really, really more or less shocked about the fact how people, there's so much aggressivity in films and in how people express themselves and how people communicate with each other and how people insult each other and these things. So I think early dance, maybe, I mean, I'm now really talking about the grandfather, you know, I'm old fashioned, but I think we could learn a little bit about the fact that people communicated differently in different times, you know. You can maybe not see it on my camera, but I only have candles and light in my room. And, you know, people were not spoiled by listening to radios and music and everyday time horrifying beats on radio and television. People, when it was dark, it was dark. So they had candles and they could see each other, and your eyes adapt to that. There was so much more. If you had music, it was a joy, because you didn't have music every week. You didn't have music every day, maybe not every month. If you had good food, I mean, okay, it depends on which social level you were living. But I think that people can realize that, I don't know, it's not only by early dance, Carlos, it's by if you look at paintings and architecture, that people enjoyed the beauty of all things. And today we really have, you know, we have nonstop music, we have nonstop electricity, we have nonstop sound, we have nonstop traffic. I mean, if I'm traveling to Bologna or to Madrid or Zaragoza or whatever, I'm there in 5 minutes. I mean, yeah. And I think we have to realize that it was never like this before.
I would like just to finish the conversation with a wonderful sentence you said. What we need is beauty in these dark times. And also I would love to invite you again, because we have to talk about cooking. And I would
I forgot that. It was on my list. Carlos, what I wanted to say is that a dance description is like a recipe. You know, you read it, you try to understand it, but everybody who's cooking, I mean, it will taste differently from every cook who is cooking it, because we have a different nose, we have maybe different quality of ingredients, and we have a different stove, because I'm cooking on gas and the other is cooking on electricity. And you have this wonderful Spanish fish and calamares and whatever you have, gambas and whatever, which I love very much. But it's really like a recipe. And that's what I think it's really, really, really interesting, that, I mean, if you're serious about it and you try to cook with the ingredients which are written down, it still remains, or your creativity and your invention and your smell and your taste, what kind of dish you get. But you have to learn to cook before.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Okay, I'm serious when I say I would like to invite you again. And let me finish that. Just thank you very much, just to share your experience and this moment with us. Thank you very much.
Okay. All the best, Carlos. Ciao. Bye.